Alfred Hitchcock. You hear that name, and what comes to mind? Screeching violins, right? Shadowy figures. That feeling of just unbearable tension. So today, let's pull back the curtain and really deconstruct the man behind the legend.
I mean, think about it. We have a word for it, right? Hitchcockian. You say that and everyone knows exactly what you mean. The guy didn't just make movies. He literally became a genre. His name, that silhouette, it's a brand, instantly recognizable.
So, the big question is, how did this happen? How does the son of a grocer from London turn into Hollywood's most famous and, let's be honest, most controlling director? What was the secret sauce? What was the blueprint?
Well, to get to that answer, we got to start with the person we all think we know. You know, that witty, kind of morbid host who'd pop up on our TV screens every week. He was an absolute master of his public image.
And he totally leaned into that persona, didn't he? This dry, proper Englishman with a deliciously dark imagination. It was all part of the act, a performance that was just as carefully put together as any of his movies.
Okay, but to really get the man behind the persona, we need to rewind, like way back. We have to go back to his beginnings, which were, let's just say, a world away from the glitz and glam of Hollywood.
So his early life? It was all about strict discipline and pretty humble beginnings. He went to a Jesuit school that, in his own words, taught him all about fear. And get this, he didn't start out as a director. Nope, he was an artist, designing the title cards for silent films. And that's where it all clicked. He learned the ropes of movie making from the ground up, and that became the bedrock for everything that came next.
But there's this one story from his childhood that, wow, it explains so much. When he was just 5 years old, his dad, as a punishment, had a police officer lock him in a cell for a few minutes. Can you imagine? It left him with this deep, lifelong fear of authority and this obsession with the idea of the wrongly accused man. And that theme, it became the engine for so many of his best movies.
Okay, so you take that psychological background, and what do you get? You get a completely unique way of making movies, a cinematic language all his own. He basically wrote the rulebook on how to play an audience's emotions like a violin.
First up, you've got the MacGuffin. This is one of his most famous tricks. It's basically the thing that everybody in the movie is chasing after. But here's the secret. Hitchcock himself couldn't have cared less what it actually was. Stolen government secrets? A diamond necklace? Who cares? It's just a gadget, a thing to get the story rolling and, more importantly, to get our heroes into a whole lot of trouble.
And this is probably his most brilliant idea. He famously said there's a huge difference between surprise and suspense. See, a surprise is just a cheap jump scare. But suspense? Ooh, that's where he tortured us. He'd show us, the audience, the bomb ticking under the table. The characters in the movie, they have no idea. And you're just sitting there helpless, wanting to scream at the screen. That feeling of dread, of knowing what's coming, that is suspense.
And how did he create that feeling? With images. Remember, this guy started in silent movies, so he was a huge believer in what he called pure cinema. He knew he could tell you way more with just a look, a specific camera angle, or a slow zoom than with a whole page of dialogue. For him, the real story was always in what you could see.
It wasn't just his films he controlled either. It was his own brand. That iconic profile sketch, yep, he designed it himself, way back in 1927. And those little cameos he did in his movies, they weren't just a fun little game. They were his signature. He was turning Alfred Hitchcock into a character, a brand that was just as recognizable as any big company logo you can think of.
And of course, this whole method, this Hitchcockian approach, it led to one of the most incredible winning streaks in Hollywood history. We're talking hit after hit after hit.
I mean, just look at this list. It's absolutely staggering. Each one of these films is like a masterclass in his techniques. You've got the MacGuffin driving North by Northwest, the pure visual storytelling of Psycho. These movies didn't just entertain, they literally defined genres. And the fact that he could deliver at this level again and again, it's just mind-blowing.
And oh yeah, he was rewarded for it, handsomely. Take Psycho. He made that movie on a super tight budget, even used his TV show crew to save money, and it made him an absolute fortune. This number you're seeing, that's what he personally made from that one movie. The guy wasn't just an artist, he was a seriously savvy businessman.
But you know what's really wild? It's how his reputation has just grown over time. Take a film like Vertigo. When it first came out, it wasn't even a massive hit.
But fast forward a few decades, and critics and filmmakers started to see just how deep and complex it really was. And then, in 2012, it did the unthinkable. It was named the greatest film ever made, knocking Citizen Kane off the top spot after 50 years. 50! That's just incredible.
His movies got tons of nominations, of course, but, and this is a twist ending that I think even Hitchcock would have appreciated, he was nominated for Best Director 5 times. And he never won. Not once. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The man who basically wrote the visual language of modern movies never got the top directing prize.
So, what's the big lesson here? What can we take away from the life of this absolute genius? Well, the final word on Hitchcock, it turns out, is a little more complicated than you might expect.
He had this famous, or maybe infamous, saying that actors should be treated like cattle. He saw them as, well, props that moved. In his mind, it wasn't a collaboration. An actor was just another piece of the puzzle to him, another element in the frame, like the lighting or the furniture, something to be completely controlled by the camera.
But for a guy who was all about total, singular control, when he finally got his big Lifetime Achievement Award in 1979, he said something that just completely pulled the rug out from under that whole idea. He got up there and said he wanted to thank 4 people who had given him the most affection.
And then he delivered the punchline. He said, and their names are Alma Revel. The first was a film editor, the second, a scriptwriter. The third was the mother of his daughter, and the fourth, a fine cook. All 4 of them were his wife, Alma. She had been his closest collaborator, right there with him from the very beginning.
And that right there is the final secret. The master of suspense, the ultimate control freak, the director who obsessed over every single frame, was never really a solo act. That famous Hitchcock touch actually had 4 hands, and 2 of them belonged to Alma. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest plot twist he ever gave us.